Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear friends of IDN, wherever you may be, let me begin with a question. If I were to ask you, who first brought Islam to South Africa, a country located at the very tip of the African continent, far from Mecca, far from Medina, most people would probably say Arab traders, perhaps, or scholars from Egypt, or missionaries from the Middle East. The answer is none of the above. The person who brought Islam to South Africa and laid the foundation for a Muslim community that today numbers in the hundreds of thousands was a prince from Tidore in the Maluku Islands of eastern Indonesia, a son of the Nusantara, an Indonesian. His name was Tuan Guru Abdullah bin Qadi Abdussalam, and his story is one of the most extraordinary chapters in the history of Islamic dua. From the Malay archipelago, a story that, strangely enough, is almost never told in Indonesia itself. In this video, we will trace the journey of how a Tidore's prince ended up in South Africa, explore the family he came from, and examine why his story is proof that the Nusantara was once an exporter of Islamic propagation to the world, not merely a recipient. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let us begin. We need to start with a correction. Modern audiences often imagine 18th century Tidore as a tiny, remote island at the far eastern edge of the archipelago. That could not be further from the truth. 18th century Tidore was one of the busiest trading hubs in the world. Why? Because at that time, cloves and nutmeg from the Maluku Islands were the most valuable commodities on earth, comparable to what oil is today. A 2026 academic journal from the University of Malaya describes Tidore as a crossroads of civilizations, where Iberians, the Portuguese and Spanish, Arabs, Chinese, Malays, and Javanese all converged, their cuisines blended, their languages borrowed from one another. Their fortresses stood side by side with mosques. According to historical records, by the 18th century, the island of Tidore, only a few miles across, already had 25 mosques, 25 that reflects an extraordinarily mature Islamic infrastructure. So the accurate picture of Tidore is this: a cosmopolitan port city, multilingual, a center of the global spice trade, with an Islamic educational ecosystem that had been running for hundreds of years. It was in this environment that Tuan Guru was born in 1712. Now we come to the most fascinating and least discussed part of this story. Where did Tuan Guru's family actually come from? His grandfather was named Habib Umar Rahmat al-Faruq. Each of these names is significant. Habib is a title reserved for descendants of the Prophet Muhammad through the Alawian line. Al-Faruq is a laqab, an honorific, commonly used among certain Sayyid families. And Rahmat is a name widely found within the Balawi network originating from Hadramaut, Yemen. According to research published by the National Awqaf Foundation of South Africa in 2018, Habib Umar sailed from Cirebon to Tidore in 1646, where he settled and became a member of the Sultan's household. Take note, Cirebon. Not directly from Hadramaut, but from Cirebon. Why does this matter? The 9 saints who brought Islam to Java, and Sunan Gunung Jati himself had Hadrami ancestry from the very same lineage. This means that Tuan Guru's family was part of the Walasango missionary network, in the most literal sense. A 2019 article in the journal Epistemé explains this pattern. The Hadrami Sayyids who entered the Nusantara followed a well-established method. They would arrive, marry into local noble families, and then integrate themselves into the royal court as Qadi Islamic judge, mufti, or religious advisor. They brought with them a complete scholarly package, Shafiq jurisprudence, Ash'ari theology, and the Alawiya tariqa. And this is precisely the pattern we see in Tuan Guru's family. His grandfather, Habib Umar, married into Tidore and entered the royal court. His father became the Qadi, the chief religious judge of the Sultanate. His mother was Boki Nuraniya, a princess of the royal household. Tuan Guru himself was born as a Sayyid descendant, the son of a Qadi, and the grandchild of royalty. In other words, Tuan Guru was not an anomaly. He was the product of a missionary system that had been developing for 400 years, stretching from Yemen to Java to Maluku. He was a fully realized blueprint. What did the Islamic educational system in Tidore look like at that time? According to a 2025 article in the journal Awqaf, the Sultanate of Tidore had 4 pillars of education. First, the mosque as the center of learning. Second, Majlis Taklim study circles for adults and the royal elite. Third, palace-based education specifically for princes and nobility. And fourth, Tariqa and Tasawwuf Sufi orders and mysticism. Tuan Guru passed through all 4 of these pathways simultaneously. His position was uniquely advantageous. He was the son of a Qadi, the grandson of a Habib, and a prince of the royal court. No door of Islamic knowledge was closed to him. Tuan Guru passed through all 4 of these pathways simultaneously. His position was uniquely advantageous. He was the son of a Qadi, the grandson of a Habib, and a prince of the royal court. No door of Islamic knowledge was closed to him. And the results of this education are evident in the writings he would later produce. Allow me to highlight 3 remarkable facts. First, he was a hafiz of the Quran. He had memorized all 30 juz by heart. We know this because later, while imprisoned in Cape Town, he would rewrite the entire Quran from memory. Second, he was fluent in classical Arabic, formal Malay, and even Portuguese. According to historical records, his writings were composed in Arabic script using both Malay and Portuguese. This was the caliber of a royal Qadi, not a village Imam. Third, he had mastered the Shafiq school of jurisprudence and the Ash'ari school of theology, and he wrote a 613-page treatise covering both subjects with such depth that it served as the primary reference. For the Muslim community of Cape Town for over 100 years, this was not superficial knowledge. This was the product of a mature Nusantara educational system. In 1779, the VOC Dutch East India Company arrested Sultan Jamaluddin of Tidore because the Sultan had refused to submit to the Dutch spice monopoly. In the course of this crackdown, the Sultan's inner circle was also swept up. Tuan Guru, who at the time served as the Sultan's religious advisor, was arrested along with 3 others, Qali Abdul Raf, Noro Ayman, and Badrodian. They were accused of conspiring with the British. Their sentence: banishment to the ends of the earth. On April 6, 1780, a VOC ship called De Zeeper docked at the harbor of Cape Town, South Africa. Tuan Guru stepped off that ship at the age of 68. He had just completed the longest voyage of his life from Tidore to the southern tip of the African continent. The VOC deliberately chose Cape Town. They feared that if Tuan Guru were exiled to Batavia or Sri Lanka, he could still build networks. In Cape Town, at the southern tip of Africa, more than 10,000 kilometers from the Nusantara, they were confident he would be unable to spread any influence whatsoever. They immediately imprisoned Tuan Guru on Robben Island, a windswept rock in the middle of the sea, South Africa's harshest isolation prison. And it was there, in that prison, at the age of 68, that Tuan Guru's dua truly began. The VOC confiscated all of Tuan Guru's religious materials, including his Quran. Their reasoning was simple. Without books, he could not teach. But the VOC did not know one thing. Tuan Guru was a hafiz. The entire Quran was in his mind. So from 1780 to 1793, over the course of 13 years on Robben Island, Tuan Guru accomplished 3 extraordinary things. First, he rewrote the entire Quran from memory. Not just 1 copy, but 5, all 30 juz per copy. Written on paper using ink he made himself and bamboo pens he carved by hand. One of these handwritten manuscripts survives to this day. It is preserved at Al Mosque in Cape Town and is considered one of the most precious Islamic artifacts in South Africa. It spans 613 pages and covers Shafiq jurisprudence and Ash'ari theology. This treatise would later become the principal textbook for the Muslim community of Cape Town for an entire century. Third, he began teaching his fellow prisoners. Robben Island was not just a prison for him. It became his first unofficial madrasah. In 1793, after 13 years of imprisonment, Tuan Guru was released. He was 81 years old. At an age when most people would have long retired, Tuan Guru was only just beginning the project of his life. He went straight to Awqaf, a neighborhood in Cape Town where enslaved people from the Nusantara and broader Asia had gathered. There, he met a formerly enslaved man named Corridon from Ceylon, who owned a house with a warehouse on Dorp Street. Tuan Guru established his madrasah in that warehouse. This was the first madrasah in all of South Africa. Its students were enslaved people, formerly enslaved people, and free black individuals. They came to learn the Quran, Islamic jurisprudence, and Arabic, in a country where Islam was still technically illegal until 1804. In 1794, after the British temporarily took control of Cape Town from the Dutch, Governor Craig granted Muslims permission to build a mosque. Tuan Guru immediately converted his warehouse madrasah into the Owl Mosque, the first mosque, the very first mosque in all of South Africa. By the time of Tuan Guru's passing in 1807, at the age of 95, his madrasah had grown to 375 students, a number so large that British colonial authorities became alarmed by the school's size. What happened after Tuan Guru's passing? This is where the true genius of his dua becomes clear. Because he built institutions, not just a personal following, what he planted continued to grow long after he was gone. From the small community he founded, the Muslim population of Cape Town now accounts for approximately 5% of the city's 4.6 million residents. An estimated 166,000 people can be identified as Cape Malay, descendants of the community. Tuan Guru helped shape, and his impact extends far beyond the Muslim community alone. Cape Muslims were the first people to write the Afrikaans language, one of South Africa's national languages. They wrote Afrikaans using Arabic script, a tradition known as Arabic Afrikaans. In other words, the written foundation of a South African national language owes a debt to Tuan Guru's madrasah. In the anti-apartheid struggle, the tradition of resistance that Tuan Guru pioneered on Robben Island was carried forward in the 20th century by Imam Abdullah Heron, who was killed in apartheid detention in 1969. It was continued by Imam Ahmed Kassem, who was imprisoned on the very same Robben Island 200 years after Tuan Guru. And Nelson Mandela himself, while imprisoned on Robben Island, studied Islam. In 1977, he visited Tuan Guru's Kramit shrine on the island to pay his respects. After his release, he visited the Owl Mosque. So when Nelson Mandela envisioned South Africa as a rainbow nation, a multiracial, multi-faith society, he was, in a sense, re-articulating something that Tuan Guru had already practiced 200 years earlier in Awqaf. Dear friends of IDN, when we reflect on this story, there is one thing that strikes me most deeply. We are often raised with the narrative that the Nusantara is merely a recipient of Islamic dua. Islam came from Arabia, passed through India, entered through Aceh, spread to Java, and reached Maluku. The Nusantara is the endpoint. Tuan Guru's story turns that narrative on its head. The Nusantara was not the endpoint. The Nusantara was an exporter. The educational system built by the Walasango. The Hadrami Nusantara missionary model refined over 400 years. The depth of scholarship cultivated in the courts of the Malay world, all of it was carried by Tuan Guru in his mind to the southern tip of Africa. And from there, a Muslim community was born that became a foundational pillar of a nation, modern South Africa. Allah says in Surah Ali Imran, verse 110, "You are the best nation raised up for humanity. You enjoin what is right, forbid what is wrong, and believe in Allah." Tuan Guru did not merely fulfill this verse for the Muslims of the Cape. He fulfilled it for the whole of South African society. Even non-Muslims today enjoy the fruits of his mission. This is the standard of true da'wah, not merely creating an insular Muslim enclave, but becoming a mercy for all of creation. May Allah be pleased with Tuan Guru. May this story remind us. the people of the Nusantara, of the extraordinary legacy we carry. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the IDN channel. The full-length Medium article with all citations is available at the link in the description. And join our Telegram community at t.me/islamdigitalnusantare for further discussion. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.